What's shaking, everybody? We are back. It's the recruiting hour here on Orange Bloods Live. I'm Jeff. He's Chad. We were just on like an hour or two ago. We're back. It's Tuesday. Wait, no, it's Wednesday, which means it's recruiting hour day. Chad, just got to make sure that I remember these things. You know, the days blend in all together. Guys, do us a solid. Don't wait until the end of the video. Give us a like right now. Just assume that we're going to do a good show and that when it's all said and done, you'd want to give us a like. If you could do that, that would be fantastic. And we welcome you to participate in the Specs chat because that's, well, every time someone does a super chat, an angel gets its wings. So send some people to heaven by participating in the Specs chat with the super chat. It's as simple as that. Chad, we've been talking like big picture all day today. In our show earlier today, we really did like a 30,000 foot view of the portal. We're kind of doing that today in the recruiting hour with regards to Texas football recruiting in 2025.
Yeah, I think weird thing that's kind of been noticed, I guess, in the recruiting realm. You mentioned this on Monday that we are obviously in the 25 cycle, but it doesn't feel like there's been a massive amount of momentum for Texas in recruiting, or at least the result of what we just saw in the season and at the draft and in other. You just haven't felt like there's been a lot of those big moments in the 25 class so far. So thought we'd kind of, take an overview today, get your thoughts on some of the biggest needs Texas has in this class, and then just kind of where your mind is on how they're addressing it, the timetable for addressing it, and obviously what you would tell a Texas fan here in May about, what's 25 look like.
I think there are two real big positional needs in this recruiting class. And what's ironic is that in a lot of ways, this will be like Clark driving around in London in European vacation. Look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament. I think defensive tackle is probably the biggest need in this recruiting class. And for a lot of the same reasons that we've been talking about it being such an important need in the portal. The Longhorns lack difference makers. They lack young guys that project to be difference makers. So I think the interior of the defensive line is one of your biggest needs. I think linebacker, given the state of things right now from a scholarship standpoint at linebacker, they've got 6 guys on scholarship. 2 of them are seniors. So presumably Maurice Blackwell and David Benda, this will be their last season, although I guess Maurice Blackwell, I don't know, I'd have to go back and look if he was a 2020 guy or a 2021 guy. I'm losing count of who has the COVID year and who doesn't. But both of those guys are seniors. That would leave you with 4 scholarship players. So the Longhorns need volume. They need bodies. Really, outside of Anthony Hill, there's no real sure thing in the young guys they have remaining. Leon Lafau, Darren Gillette, Ty Anthony Smith. That's it at the linebacker position. So for me, those 2 are paramount. I think it's interesting. I think then there's like philosophical conversations about the other positions. We look at quarterback. I don't think it's a monster need because you just got Arch Manning sitting in the holster waiting to be used. And knowing that he has multiple years of eligibility, I mean, could he go pro after a season? I guess, but like that's not what people are expecting. So quarterback doesn't feel urgent. Running back, because they just, they don't have a senior running back. All their guys are junior or younger. Jaden Blue's a junior. He's draft eligible after this year, but Wisner, Baxter, Clark, Gibson, all young guys. So there's a world out there where they just next year they could return everybody. They couldn't need to replace Jaden Blue, but like it's not a massive need at this point. I think receiver is a position that you could argue could come in at number 3. You could argue offensive line. I think you could argue tight end. I think you can always make the case that edge and quarterback should be at the top of the list. So maybe edge is up there. And then even in the secondary, they are scheduled to lose Gavin Holmes, Jahdae Barron, Andrew Makuba. That could be a healthy chunk of the starting secondary this year. We know they'll address some of this stuff in the portal next year as well. I don't feel like any of those other positions, Chad, for me, are anywhere close to interior defensive line and linebacker.
Okay.
I think you want to get superstar badasses everywhere you can. But there's not another position that I look at and go, what are they going to do if they don't get an elite level class like I do these other two positions? Everything else is debatable. Anybody that wanted to make the case that it's offensive line, I will listen. Anybody that wants to make the case that, they could use kind of a badass tight end. They're going to lose Gunnar Helm. We don't quite know what Amari Niblack is. Other than Jordan Washington, what do they have coming up through the wings? So, I'd even listen to tight end. But defensive tackle and linebacker are the big two. And I think it's kind of interesting to look at how things are going at those positions right now, because there are definitely stories that need to be told with regards to that. And I don't want to go on just ramble here, but we mentioned Johnny Bowens, who I text messaged, you never know. He could have come back to me and I hadn't even checked my phone.
Come on, Johnny.
Johnny did not get back with me yet, but I literally just sent him the text right before we came on. They're potentially looking at him. I really think if they're interested in him, that's a spot in this recruiting class that they're using for that spot, as opposed to just merely thinking about this from a portal standpoint. So, so from your standpoint, having heard that, where would you like to go?
Well, we'll definitely dig into those two positions. I did see this interesting chat. I want to know if you agree with this kind of a thought. Roan45 put in, sometimes we think a certain position will be a problem and the season starts and it turns out a completely different position is a problem. Do you think that is a part of Texas's world right now?
No, because sometimes you think a certain position will be a problem and then the season starts and it turns out, yep, that fucking problem was a problem. That happens too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit like, sometimes 2 stars and 3 stars turn into NFL draft prospects. It's like, well, yeah, no, they do. I mean, look, injuries are always the great unpredictable element in all of this. We say running back, the depth is great, but what if they lost Blue and Baxter and suddenly it's Wisner and a couple of freshmen? Then all of a sudden it's like running back's not as deep as we thought it was. Where's Savion Red when you need him?
I think there's an embedded injury in that. The word injury is not anywhere in there, but I think they're embedding it into their thought process. Because I would agree with you. Like, if you think D tackle's an issue and running back's not, once we get it 2-3 games into the season with this group, I would assume it's only an injury could change that discussion.
Well, and look, this is a lot different. Look, I think Texas A&M is a perfect example of this. It's Mike Elko in year one. Completely no. You have an idea of what the roster looked like under Fisher, but under Elko, you've got so many. You've got quarterback questions that you're not completely sure of in terms of, will Connor Weigman can he stay healthy? How good is he? There are questions there, even though we may think, I think you and I think he has a chance to be really good, but in general, he's kind of a big shoulder shrug. So you look at a team, by the way, this fly is still here, Chad.
I've seen it a couple times. It's become, we have a side character on The Outsiders every Wednesday, which is Chance Mock Ceiling Fan. Now the fly is becoming your co-host.
Is it like my pet? What's going on here? Or am I its pet?
It really, what happens is you think you're seeing a little video anomaly. Like, you think you're seeing your video stunting or stopping, and then you realize, oh no, that's a fly in the room just cruising around.
I'm going to get me some chopsticks.
Yeah.
And sit here and do the show. and then try to be Mr. Miyagi at the same time.
Yeah. Now, something did occur to me, Catch, as you were talking about the problem discussion. It doesn't have to be injuries, I guess. It could be great performance. Like maybe the question of D tackle goes away this year for Texas if Collins and Broughton and Savea and Norton are just beasts, then you just move your discussion to a new position. That could be what.
Look, nobody is saying. These are question marks. Now, as we look at recruiting, this is a completely different discussion. I mean, what we're talking about right now is real-time 2024 question marks during the season.
Mm-hmm.
There is no question that these are the primary concerns. It's like receiver a year ago. You can look at the depth chart, see the departures, and anticipate we've got to have guys to replace those guys. I mean, even when we look at the defensive tackle position, you know, it's a question mark, Chad. D tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But after this season, they lose Collins, Norton, Savea, and Broughton.
Yeah, they lose the four I just named.
Whatever we think of the defensive tackle position when this season is over, Bledsoe, Bryant, Mitchell, Hills, and January will remain.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously that's why you bring it up first. So let's dig in there. We know what they just lost at that position. You're just laying out what they've got, what they'll continue to have, and we all know how important it is and how tough it is to find. So as I look at the 25 class, Brandon Brown is there as a commit.
Yes.
Where does the discussion go?
I think you'd have to call him a soft commit. He is taking visits.
Mm-hmm.
There's anticipation that he could peel off for a number of schools when it's all said and done. They'll have to, but you know, his words say he's committed. His actions say he's not. So we're somewhere in between. He's like, no, I'm 100% committed. My family loves Texas. To, whoa, I just saw a second fly, Chad.
Now that one felt more like a vulture. That really felt more like a small vulture. I saw that.
It was like a Tom Cruise. They when they go past the tower, that's what they just buzz the tower.
Negative, Ghost Rider. Pattern's full.
They just did that.
Should I be? That means I should be drinking and then do the spit take when blah blah.
So if you've got Brown, I think that he's got some Byron Murphy qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And from a recruiting profile standpoint, they're pretty similar. So, I mean, if you know you're getting him, he's a good piece of the puzzle. He really is.
So in terms of this class, let me start here. Is there a Colin Simmons-like smack that Texas could make in this class at D tackle?
No. Okay. No, because when you look at the truly elite of the elite defensive tackles in the state in the country this year, doesn't seem like Texas is. I mean, 3 of the top 5 guys in the country are already committed. 1 to USC, and if you remember, we talked about this months ago. But Clemson already has 2 of the top 5 defensive tackles in this class committed.
Yeah, better do it now because they won't get them out of the portal. Sorry, go ahead.
When you look at guys in the state of Texas, and look, Texas from an out-of-state standpoint is trying. You know, when we talked about Jamie French on Monday, and we talked about May, June is when we start to really get a sense for, okay, this is where guys are leaning. You know, there's some guys that you know months out in advance. And then there are other guys. We mentioned Wingo from a year ago. We mentioned really all of the out-of-state guys outside of Jarrett Gibson from last year. The puzzle pieces started to become a little clearer, like what went together really in about towards the end of this month, typically under Sarkisian, and then certainly into June. We may have a better idea of the defensive tackle situation out of state, beyond obviously Brown, who, by the way, just like for full transparency, he's the number, like to give you some context, he's currently the number 21 defensive tackle in the country.
Okay.
So he's a good player.
Right. But he's not. No, they're not all crawling over themselves and punching each other to get to him necessarily.
I mean, I think sometimes you talk yourself into our guy. That's what our guys like. Right. You like him so much that you convince yourself. This is what we do in recruiting. We convince ourselves. It's like arguing with people from spring football about a guy like Leona LaFowl or Darren Gillette, where people, they hear that a guy had a good practice or maybe 2 good practices out of 15, but because they've heard his name, it's like, no, he's going to be a player. I've heard good things. And it's like, well, he's not going to play this year. And it remains to be seen kind of what it means. Mm-hmm. Like on one hand, I know where you're coming from. On the other hand, like there is a little bit of a great unknown that until they do it, we don't really know. Like we think we know, you hope. Confirmation bias kicks in and you think all your players are going to be good. I think Brown is a really good prospect. I think that's not a bad building block to have. But, if I wanted to say I don't think he's the 21st best defensive tackle in the country, I'm still not arguing that he should be a 5-star or probably like a super blue chip. So, they need some of those guys. Really, that's what they lack. To me, and what's interesting is that when you look at the state of Texas, DJ Sanders is a guy we've talked about.
Yeah, I was going to
finally did visit Texas. And while he says there's not a leader, there's a suspicion that A&M is the betting favorite there. We'll see. He's going to
Sanders he's the Belleville guy?
Correct.
Okay.
And then you've got Zion Williams, who's the number 12 defensive tackle in the country, out of Lufkin, who, when he visited Texas a few weeks ago, about a month ago, he raved about Texas. Remember, we talked about there are 2 guys can say the same thing in a roundabout way, but if you listen to the interview and the context of the interview, one thing sounds like another. Zion Williams sounded like he loved Texas. DJ Sanders sounded like a guy that really liked Texas, maybe almost in they're nice kind of a way.
Yeah. Good personality.
Exactly. No, great personality.
Yeah.
Outside of that, inside the state of Texas, there's nobody else that's ranked inside the top 25 defensive tackles in the country right now in the Rivals rankings. There are a couple of guys that I like, but I'm not going to quibble too much because ultimately, I've told you this a million times, the difference between a regular 4-star and a 3-star isn't as wide of a gap as a lot of people would suspect. So if these guys aren't elite of the elite, there's only so much standing on the table to tell people how good they are you can do. They're really good prospects, but you start to get in there's probably about a 20% chance that they hit at a fairly high level. And at a school like Texas, to hit on one of those 4-stars is to ask him, you're going to be an NFL player, right? Because if they're not NFL players, Texas typically is looking for an upgrade. Like that's what we've seen along the defensive tackle position. And it's like, well, they got Bill Norton. And it's like, well, yeah, he's pretty good. But why do they want Dominic Williams? Because he's viewed as maybe more of a Sunday player, impact player at the collegiate level than just a good player. Considering the importance of this Texas, the defensive line and the defensive tackle position for Texas in this class, I don't think they're going to get what I would tell you they need. I think, wouldn't shock me if they get Zion Williams. Let's say they keep Brandon Brown. They get another commitment in there.
Yeah, by the way, Cotton, when you ask about Brandon Brown is who we mentioned. We're talking about the commit that's in the class because we're talking DT. So you didn't miss anything. That's the Brown we were discussing.
Yeah, we're talking about the defensive tackle position as a whole. In the event that you don't know who we're talking about, Brandon Brown committed to Texas back when Bo Davis was, and he committed to Texas in December 19th. So he committed when Bo Davis was here. He has stayed committed since Bo Davis left, but he's visited LSU. He's looking at a number of schools. He took He's got an official visit scheduled with USC in June, the week after he visits Texas. Before that, he visits Tennessee. Like, he's going to look all over around the country, and the Longhorns are probably going to have to hold on for dear life on that one. There's a real sense that that'll be a tough one. But if they do, he's a good prospect. I'll also say in advance that if they were to lose him, there's no need to freak out. He's not a super blue chip. And I think the fear I have with the defensive tackle class as a whole is that they're going to sign a nice defensive tackle class, but not a class that maybe even has a single elite level prospect. And that's a problem. Like, because when you sign a nice defensive tackle class, more times than not, those guys need 2 or 3 years to develop. And I think Texas could use as much of an instant impact, or they're going to need to go back into the portal and swing the bat again, Chad, to try to get.
Yeah.
And maybe next year they tell Bear Alexander, we'll give you 1.5. Like, there was a sense of desperation that I don't think they really had in the portal. But at some point, even if guys they have on campus start to develop, they're still only going to have a handful of guys on campus when this season is over with. They have to bolster the numbers, and they got to find a way to get some impact guys. And my concern for the class right now is that guy doesn't exist. There's not a Colin Simmons. There's not a DeCorian Moore. There's not even, I think, maybe even like a Keoti Armstrong, a guy that at the tight end position I think is one of the best I've seen in the last 20 years. He's not rated as a 5-star guy, and yet I think that of him. I don't know. I don't think that guy exists in the state of Texas, and because that doesn't exist, it's a crapshoot with out-of-state recruiting, and the numbers for elite guys are pretty far and few between, and it remains to be seen just where Texas will ultimately stand with those guys.
Somebody sent us a chat kind of along the lines of DTs. Elite DTs don't grow on trees, few and far between.
It's almost as if I read his chat.
Yeah, Jeff. It's what we talk about it all the time with this position, which sort of brings me to, you talk about a nice D tackle class. That's not something Texas wants, each and every year. You don't want to just be able to say that it's just nice. You want to have some of that elite talent. How important does that become for you? Since this is the first year of the SEC, how do you think a nice D tackle class works out in the SEC? Like now, who lives in the SEC that's got nice D tackle classes?
It probably changes from year to year. And I think nice is okay when you're a developing son of a gun. And I think it's a really strange thing that Bo Davis did so well with the Tom Herman recruits, and was able to literally did zero with the guys that he recruited. I mean, even this year, the guys that are returning that are expected to play are Herman guys. So now they've changed defensive tackle coaches. There's not really a track record for us to lean on. So what does nice mean? I don't know. It's Kenny Baker doesn't come with a track record that allows us to say, well, look, when he was at Georgia or when he was at Ole Miss, nice worked out pretty well. He does really well with nice. There are some guys that don't do well with nice, that do, Matt Brown used to talk about it. He wanted war daddies. When did he win his national championship? When he had Vince freaking Young, and beyond that, when did he win Big 12 championships? Well, it didn't happen very often.
Yeah. He also, for the record, had some pretty good D tackles on that national championship team, from what I recall too.
Well,
guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice. It's nice when you can get it. I mean, Matt Brown inherited Sean Rogers and Casey Hampton.
Yeah.
And you know what? Steve Sarkisian inherited Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat.
Yeah.
But now it's not about inheriting. It's about securing your own. And I don't know. The thing is, if you get nice and they get 3 of the level prospects that I just described, so let's say 3 guys that are national top 25 defensive tackles, but none that are top 5 or top 8 or top 10. I mean, at that point, we're watering it down significantly, but you're probably hoping that 1 out of the 3 makes it. The math suggests you won't do better than 1 out of 3. 2 out of 3, that's what happens with 5 stars.
And when you say makes it, you mean makes it to like the NFL or?
Well, to be a high-level impact player, a starter,
be a badass.
Texas and Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State. That's not to say that they don't have some starters that don't make it that high. But usually the guys, think about a guy like Blake Gideon, right? The guy played in like 1 million games at Texas, but he didn't play in the NFL, but he started a long time. It can happen, but you're also probably talking about a guy when they're not at that level that fans are constantly talking about, we could upgrade that guy. They always said that about Gideon. We can find somebody better than Blake Gideon. And it's like, well, no, you didn't. He played a long time and he was a good player. Those guys do exist, but they're unicorns in their own way. I mean, we talk about look, Texas just had a team that had 11 guys drafted off of it. Having NFL drafted guys matter. For a long time, Texas fans have argued with me that should not be the metric that we use to determine whether or not players have been good or not. Do you know who says that, Chad? Fans don't have NFL players.
Yeah, fans of teams that don't get drafted.
The moment you start putting out 11 guys in a draft is the moment you're like, NFL drafted guys, that's what's up.
That matters.
It's nice when all your upperclassmen get drafted the next year. So I think Texas, their trajectory at this point is to have a nice defensive tackle class, and you're probably hoping that 1 out of 3-ish hit. I mean, we're talking in very generic terms here. And, you'd like to be a little bit better than that. You'd like to have a super blue chip guy that skewers the math for you heavily in one direction. And in your mind, you're counting on that guy to hit. And then with the rest of the guys, you're like, man, if we just get one guy to hit amongst the rest of the guys, we're cooking with grease. It's when you've got 3 or 4 guys and the math says 1 out of 4 is going to hit. But you could, how does Texas go 10 years without any success like it basically did in the time between Sarkisian's big season this year and back when Mac had a pretty good, you might even take it back a little further than 10 years. You're on the wrong side of the math a lot. You're 4 stars instead of 1 out of 4, you're hitting 1 out of 6. And it might not sound like, a huge deal when you say it like that. Yeah, what's the difference? 1 out of 4 versus 1 out of 6. Well, over the course of years, you stack those numbers up. What it really means is you're developing talent below the Mendoza line. That's Texas didn't have problem getting 4 stars. Texas had a problem developing its 4 stars. Right now, it's a hard conversation to have with Texas. New defensive tackle coach without a real track record. And this staff hasn't proven that they have a good eye for defensive tackle talent. Because not one guy that they've recruited since 2021 is a serviceable player that they can either count on this year or in previous years. It just hasn't happened yet.
We'll keep an eye on that position. Obviously, Alex January, a part of the young group coming in. Maybe he changes the whole mindset about D tackles for what they can get. We'll talk some linebackers because Ketch mentioned that as an important position. Let's take a quick breath here and we'll hear from Specs. We got good chats in that we will get to as well. Somebody sent a chat about a receiver, I believe it is, they wanted you to talk about. We'll do that right after Lisa tells you about Specs.
Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers, to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Spec. Cheers to savings.
Hey, go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say thanks to Specs for being a great partner of ours. I had a couple chats that I liked here, but what you got?
I was going to say I got like 12 minutes left.
Oh, 12 minutes. I thought you had 12 chats. I'm like, whoa.
No. So I'm just giving you an idea of, like, I'm going to have to get out in a little bit. But let's do some chats and we'll finish up the conversation that we're having.
Okay, Vivek sent this one in. Catch, do we need to go? No, we need to go after Michael Terry. Don't know why Texas is underrating him so much. Michael Terry is a receiver.
Yeah, he's a receiver out of the San Antonio area and maybe the best player prospect out of San Antonio this year. I think I've got him ranked 12th in the state. I'm a big Michael Terry fan. Ultimately, Michael Terry wants to play receiver more than he wants to do anything else. And I think Texas, the one area right now where you look at recruiting and you go, my God, is Texas even going to have enough room? Can they have space for all of the badass receivers that ultimately might want to come to Texas? I think Terry's in a little bit of a numbers crunch. I think Texas probably prefers him on defense more than they prefer him on offense. I mean, he's a guy, Chad, if you watch his film, you can imagine him being a badass linebacker in time. I just think that right now they have other priorities, other guys ranked ahead of him, and then consequently there are other schools that have Michael Terry ranked higher probably than Texas does. So they're giving him more love than Texas is, and that thing just is kind of dissolved a little bit.
So then to your other position need for Texas, do they just need to recruit him as a linebacker and they'll solve everybody's problem?
Well, yeah, but he doesn't want to be a linebacker. Like he sees himself more as a receiver than anything else. And I think Texas really likes him at receiver. It's just one of these years where they're going to be turning guys away like Michael Terry, assuming they get DeCorian Moore, right? And assuming a guy like Jamie French comes aboard and that Khalil Lockett, there's some assuming that you take place here and that Texas got to get a handful of these guys. But I think they are. And so Michael Terry's kind of a little bit down the totem pole.
Yeah, and thank you, Jeff. I did see your comment on Terry there. Yeah, I said Terry wants to play wide receiver. I think we would take more French, Lockett, and Johnson over Terry at wide receiver. Jeff, thank you for that chat. Somebody else sent in, catch a chat. Whoa, come on, get rid of there. Sent in a chat about D tackle. We can hit that before we close, but I want you to talk about linebacker a little bit since you mentioned it as that other big position.
Let's do the D tackle real quick. That way we can just move on from that.
Okay. This was Nate saying, for a position that takes so long to develop, doesn't need continuity, isn't the portal the best to fill that need? Use portal for D tackles in contract years and develop the O line. If that's the thinking moving forward, Catch, wouldn't Texas have pushed harder for guys like Nolan or Caldwell or something like that in the first part of the portal window? Is that the left? Maybe.
Yes. And there's not, other than Walter Nolan, and look, Chad can tell you Walter Nolan hasn't been elite yet. He's just a guy that has the tools to be an elite guy, and he's been good. And, Bear Alexander's not a great player. Dominic Williams is not a great player. The portal they're great players at defensive tackle haven't proven that they really hit the portal. And so I feel what you're saying, Nate. I think the guys that we're talking about that they need. I mean, Dominic Williams is like a stopgap, but he's not maybe a high-level NFL prospect. Maybe he develops into that at Oklahoma. But we're talking about a guy that was honorable mention all Big 12 last year and did nothing in games against Texas, right? Like it wasn't an impact player. And I was open about that when Texas was recruiting him, that you're talking about a guy that has a chance to be very good. Look, he wasn't so good that TCU was like, we'll give you whatever you want no matter what. Like, that didn't happen. Yeah. I think in a perfect world, you would do both. But the defensive tackle options in the portal aren't a perfect world and probably will never be. Now, Chad, as it relates to linebackers, I'm much more optimistic that Texas can put together a linebacker class that's more in the vein of what we're talking about that Texas would need at defensive tackle. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that I think there is a guy at the linebacker position in state. He might not be Colin Simmons, but I think he's a super blue. I think you're talking about a nationally elite linebacker candidate, a guy that's a super blue chip. I think there is a guy of that level. I think Riley Pettijohn from McKinney, Texas, I think he's going to end up at Texas. I think I've already got him future casted to end up at Texas. I swear to God, when this show is over with, I'm getting a can of Raid, and I may kill myself, but there's going to be a fly holocaust in this house. Done. I think Riley Pettijohn has a chance to be the standout guy at that position. And so if they can get that, and I think they are, then that gives you the super blue chip level prospect that you can build around. Now you'd like to get a second guy, right? That's when you start to have truly elite, nationally elite classes at those positions. But, you start with Riley Pettijohn, and then I think a lot of the linebacker class beyond that kind of remains to be seen, that it's still a work in progress. I think these official visits matters significantly. I think they're doing everything they can to get in on some out-of-state guys that might elevate the level of options that are available to them. But, at least there's a Riley Pettijohn. I wonder, though, if there's a second guy that's at that level that will join them in this class. At this point, I don't know. Like, I tend to see him as the jewel, and then they'll probably surround him with other prospects that are a little bit maybe like the defensive tackles that we were just talking about, really good prospects, but not guys that change the math on you. So in a weird way, I don't know that I don't think there's a monster class at either of the two positions they want to sign. But I think linebacker class has a chance to be better than the defensive tackle class, because I think the anchor of that linebacker class could be just the level of an early guy, a guy that can get on the field early, a guy that has high upside, a guy that projects as a possible future high-level college player who then plays in the NFL. That's who I think he potentially has a chance to be. I have him rated as a top 10 prospect in the state. Beyond that, I think there are questions, and there are probably more questions than answers.
By the way, when JW Crunch says, where did he ever stand out at A&M? Chad, is he referring to Nolan? That's the only Aggie we would have talked about today.
I don't know. I mean,
if you're referring to Walter Nolan, Ketch pretty much said it, but yeah, Walter Nolan, were there moments where he stood out? Yes. Have there been enough of them, in my opinion, in terms of no. To me, he's been a rich man's Daylon Mack.
Ooh.
That's what he's been. He's been that guy that when he flashes, holy hell.
That's probably fair.
The flash is something you'll remember. I can still remember Ketch a Daylon Mack play I got to see from field level at Kyle Field. I can still remember it. There's just not 12 of them. There's not 15 of them. And that play was against Nevada. There you go. And Walter Nolan is worlds better than that in a lot of ways, but he hasn't been enough. Not enough times. But am I crushed that I don't get to see the development in the maroon and white uniform? Yes, absolutely. And I also think, Ketch, I've said it, I do think he was also the victim of DJ Durkin's dumbass defense at times. That's also a true thing as well. But he feels like he's going to a place where he can find better defensive scheming, and that team is coached by Lane Kiffin. Do that with what you will.
The other thing about the 2025 class, we haven't mentioned his name, but Bo Barnes is obviously committed to Texas. I think to me, he's a DJ Sanders. He's a Zion Williams guy. He is kind of a mid to low. He's a national top 100 to 150 guy. I don't know that I view him as a super blue chip prospect. I don't know that he's that kind of a player, although he may be that kind of an athlete. He's somewhere in between. So when I talk about like Pettyjohn has a chance to be the biggest piece, they've got Bo Barnes. They'll get another couple of guys. It'll probably be 4-star level prospects. And if you're Texas, you're counting on Pettyjohn hitting, and you're hoping that one out of those 3 hit. Like, that's the math. And where things get real crazy is when you start beating the math. And, how did Charlie Strong get the Texas job? In a lot of ways, a lot of people will pinpoint and say it's as easy as, well, he had Teddy Bridgewater and that's all he needed. Well, that's a big part of it. He had his quarterback that allowed him to have the success at Louisville to get the Texas job. But while he was at Louisville, Chad, they developed 2 stars like 3 stars, 3 stars like 4 stars, and 4 stars like 5 stars. In fact, at a lot of positions, they developed 3 stars at 5-star levels, where one out of every other guy they sign is being drafted in the NFL. And that's a bonkers hit rate. Georgia doesn't do that. Not even the Georgia of like dominant Georgia doesn't do that. Alabama at its peak isn't going every other guy being drafted in the NFL. They don't. Matter of fact, those schools typically, Chad, their development's actually below the national norms. At Alabama and Georgia, over the course of their mini dynasties or flat out dynasties, they don't develop their players at a mathematical rate that's suggesting they're getting elite of the elite coaching. Those programs actually, and maybe some of this is because they do have, there are reasons why these numbers would be this way, including some of these guys aren't sitting around waiting for their chance because they want to get on the field elsewhere. But they're developing talent below the national numbers, the norms, the medians. But they've got so many guys that give them a math advantage that it doesn't matter. That their 1 out of 4s might be 1 out of 6s, but their 1 out of 2s are 1 out of 2s, and they get a shitload of 1 out of 2s. So it's like, well, you got 20 guys, and 10 of them become drafted NFL players. Or really at a 5-star level, you sometimes really get into like 2 out of 3 hit instead of 1 out of 2. And then you start getting 20 guys and 2/3 of them hit. Your roster's just loaded. Charlie was able to get the Texas job because he was able to develop 3-star players at 5-star rates. He was getting 1 out of 2s and 1 out of 3s at certain positions, tight end, offensive line, on defense. That's how he got the Texas job. Then he came to Texas and he developed 4 stars like 3 stars, 3 stars like 2 stars, and 2 stars like 0 stars. Except for Deontay Foreman, that 2-star developed almost like a 5-star.
That one went up.
That one did go up.
That went up.
So, it's all about the math. And if you're Texas, I think at both of these positions, you really want to come away with 2 players who can become impact starting level players at this level. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Because you're going to do the portal. You're going to have a recruiting class in 2026 and 2027 and every year thereafter. But you'd like to come away with 2 guys. And look, think about that offensive line class from 2022. Who have they hit? They signed 7 guys. Who have they hit on so far? 2 guys. They've hit on Banks and they've hit on Campbell. And Neto hasn't really emerged as a starter. Yamuzalo, for those of you that don't think I can say his name. Cole Hudson really hasn't hit yet. Malik Agbo's been more of a tight end than an offensive lineman. You know, you start looking. Connor Robertson he played a little bit last year when they get an injury to Jake Majors, but they've got 2 starters so far and Cam Williams hasn't really been a starter yet. Now, it looks like Cam Williams is going to be the 3rd guy that hits out of that offensive line class. But that was an offensive line class with 2 5-star players, 2 other super blue chips, 2 other nationally recruited offensive linemen. It's hard. You don't just say, well, we're 3 out of our 4 guys or 2 out of our 3 guys. It's just that's one of the things I try to educate people in recruiting, because the only way you can really know what you're talking about and have realistic expectations, and I swear to God, Fly, I'm shutting my office door, Chad. I'm shutting it. And I've got a hammer over here.
Oh, no, don't go busting up those valuable things behind you with a hammer. Go get a fly swatter. They invented something for this.
It's mine.
Fly swatter.
But I know I sometimes wear people out with the discussion of the math involved. But it's really important, because I'll tell you, I can remember when Texas signed that 7-man offensive line class. I had this 05 Prey is one of our posters over at Orange Bloods. And we had this conversation where it's like, you know, as much as we're talking up this offensive line class, 7 guys, if Texas hits 2, that's like the national, that would be doing, you know, because your offensive linemen, the thing is, and I know this has turned into kind of a nerdy recruiting conversation, but when you recruit Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell in the same class, the math says you're going to hit on one of them. That 1 out of 2 oftentimes is as good as it gets. Where Texas, what's been the key to Sarkisian's success so far is he hasn't really missed on a super blue chip guy. He should be missing on more super blue chips. Their super blue chips are hitting. And because of that, that's how they ended up they didn't quite have Georgia and Ohio State depth last year, but their starting lineup was hitting everywhere. All those guys were they haven't missed on many. The problem is it's hard to get your hands on them. Like, what I would say is Texas is recruiting the hell out of the elite of the elite. They're producing great and very, very good players out of their pile of super blue chips at a rate that's got to be as high as anybody in the country. They just got to get more of them. And then the math has to be in that ballpark with the rest of the numbers they have. And I think they'll consistently be competing for national championships. That's how you do it. Their problem at defensive tackle and linebacker is that and really whatever I think of Riley Pettijohn, he's not what Kelvin Banks was as an offensive line prospect, and he's not what DJ Campbell was as an offensive line prospect. I think he's a super blue chip, but I think he's a skosh below those 2 guys in terms of the level. Those guys were like number 1, number 2 prospects in the state. I think he ended up having Banks 4th or 5th when it was all said and done, but I had him ranked as a 5-star, unlike rivals. So anyway, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with the nerdy math lesson.
All right, there it is. Catch needs to roll, so we will do that. Right before we do, let's remind you that if you want to advertise with Orange Bloods, here is how you do it. Contact our guy Cody or Sonny or maybe both and let them know what your idea is. What's your company? What's your idea? Do you want to be part of Orange Bloods? We have got SEC Media Days coming up in July. Want to be a part of sponsoring that? You can do it, or maybe it's orangebloods.com, your favorite column, your favorite article, your favorite writer, or maybe it's something here on Orange Bloods Live. Reach out to Sonny or Cody, and they will be glad to talk to you about all of that.
All right. Did we have any final chats that we didn't get to?
I did not have anything marked. No.
Okay.
I did not have anything marked. There was some, there was some stuff here and there. I'm a fan of Alex January, so somebody did throw in the Alex January and Melvin Hills are both going to be very good on the interior.
But that's the thing, Gary. Actually, the math says hope to hit one of those.
Right. Yeah.
Like the math says it would actually be quite the development hit to go 2 for 2 on those two guys.
So if they're both really good, that would continue this anomaly you're talking about.
If he's saying they're going to be very good players on the interior, if that means, let's say they're on the 2 deep or starters, then yeah, the math says one out of every 4 or 5 of those guys. Melvin Nils was like a high 3-star player, and I think Alex January's better than he was ranked, but in reality, at best, he's still 1 out of 4. I mean, that's why I try to explain the math to you on these guys. Alex January. And look, Chad's like the president of the Alex January fan club.
I do enjoy me some Alex January. It's probably because he whipped my football team right in front of me at a high school game.
He saw him in person and the confirmation bias kicked in like a mother.
Absolutely.
And the same with me. Like, I want to sit here and tell you, oh, yeah, Alex January, he's definitely going to be an NFL football player. The math says he's a 1-4 guy. And the thing is, it's not always about talent. The reason why guys end up being 1 out of 4 is because there's a million things that can happen to a guy. He can get hurt. In addition to not being as good as you thought, he can get hurt. He can have academic problems. He can get in off the field issues. Samaje Burrell was a 1-4 guy. Do you know why he's a 1-4 guy today? Because he hit Tavondre Sweat's car. Like, sometimes the things that keep a guy from developing into a really good player are things you can't really control. And it's why 1 out of 4 is a very nebulous, generic, statement about a guy. But that 3 out of 4 covers everything else that can happen to him. He won the Super Lotto and decided he was never going to work or do anything again a day in his life. Factors into the 3 out of 4 that don't. It's every reason in the world why a guy doesn't make it versus 1 out of 4 make it. And it's, sadly, there's probably a better chance that 1 out of 2 of those guys between Hills and January has an injury problem, tears an ACL, hurts his back, something. Like, there's probably as good of a chance of that happening as there is that he'll turn into a very good player who's going to play at a level that would allow him to play in the NFL. I hate to be like the guy that rains on everybody's parade, but, I want everybody to be as educated as possible about the conversation that we're having and what you hope to accomplish. And if you're Texas, you want to get 2 linebackers and 2 defensive tackles in this recruiting class to pull that off. And I don't know if they're going to quite be able to get there from a math standpoint. They may have to lean on the portal. They may have to overdevelop in terms of the numbers and how they get there. But, it's not as easy as, hey, they signed 3 or 4 4-star guys. So, problem solved. It rarely goes exactly like that. It's why when you look at the roster right now and you're talking about Bryant and Jure Bledsoe, those guys are getting ready to go into their 3rd year. And it hasn't happened yet. It may never happen. Those guys aren't even being counted on this year to be players. So are they going to wait for another year? Will it change next year? Will the light switch come on? Like, we all like these players, and I think Jure Bledsoe's a guy the coaches like. I think fans like him, but it hadn't happened yet. And they are recruiting defensive tackles to place in front of him at high rates, Chad, high rates.
Catch, before we get out of here, Teta has put this chat in twice and has found the fly emoji, so let's get to it. Aggie hits and puts players in the NFL, and Aggie hasn't won championships. The fly in catches theory, no pun intended. Multiple fly emojis. the wink emoji. You did spell Aggie wrong there, Teta, a couple times. But
You
there you go,
realize
Kat.
they do that on purpose, right?
There it is. Is that right? Oh, that's intentional? They haven't all been.
It's a Texas Longhorn thing to do, to spell Aggie, Aggy.
Oh, I see. I'm now fully updated. All right. There you go. There it is.
Chad, let me ask you. Have you guys been putting NFL players into the draft at like crazy rates?
Yeah, I was going to say, Teta, 11 in a draft? I mean, we could take a look at some numbers. I'm not saying the Aggies haven't had drafts where guys get drafted. 11 recently? I don't think so. I just went back and
I'm looking this up. I want him. I'm pulling up on Wikipedia.
Sadly, Catch, I can pull this up. I have literally looked it up for another purpose. I can tell you, they
had 4 this year. They had 3 the year before that.
Yeah.
They had 4 the year before that. They had 4 the year before that. They had 2 the year before that. And also, like, the problem is they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 day first and second day picks over the last 5 years. Isn't terrible.
Right. No, it's not. Yeah, it hasn't been bad. It's been up until this draft. Both Texas and Texas A&M were at an average that's okay.
Yeah.
But it wasn't awesome. Georgia and Ohio State were at 8 a year, and Bama was at 9 a year for the
in the last 5 draft classes, going back to 2020. A&M's never had more than 4 guys drafted in any class.
Yeah. So, Teta, I get that you want to take your shot. You're just taking the wrong shot. You can go feel free to take a shot and say A&M hasn't won championships. That's fine. But don't act like they've been sending 6 or 8 guys to the draft every year. That's not happening.
I mean, if that 2021, because 2020 was the COVID year when A&M was really good, right?
That's the year they won the Orange Bowl. Correct.
The next year they had 4 guys drafted. If that number had been 8.
Yeah, right. Then, yeah.
Not 11. If it had been single digits, but twice as much as 4, that A&M team may have gotten over the hump. That little hump that didn't quite get over. 4 more NFL players may have gotten them over the hump.
That might have done it. And as we've talked about, definitely if you're a Texas fan, do not expect 11 to happen every year. That would be silly. Nobody does that. I'd be looking for 5 to 8. That's the range. If you can get 5 to 8 drafted every year,
you need to have
good number.
A double digit year once if you want to be if you want to be competing for national championships.
Once in a while, yeah. Sure.
Once out of every 2 or 3 years. Next year, there's a good chance they could have double digits. Now, The year after next year might not be double digits, but you get a couple of those. 2 out of 4, even if it's close, like if it's 9, you're pumping them out. That's what the Longhorns did during the heyday of Mac Brown.
Oh yeah.
Once upon a time, Texas had the most guys in the NFL of any school in the country.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, both of the Flies
I know. I know. I've been waiting for I'll stop and you can kill them whenever you're ready. I'm just
thing is, I gotta find. Look, I'm still unpacking. I gotta go find the can of Raid or the fly swatter. I know they make fly swatters, and if I was a true red-blooded American male, I'd just kill a man. By the way, random thought: my dogs keep bringing turtles into the house.
Really?
2 days in a row. They put them in my bed.
Turtles or turtles?
One of each.
Really?
Yeah, it almost felt like it could have been a mama and a kid.
You got a dog that is dexterous enough to be able to carry a full-size turtle?
Yesterday.
The hell?
The thing is, so yesterday I saw the turtle in its mouth, and I thought it was like a chew toy. I thought it was, Heather will buy these hoof-looking things.
Yeah.
That are, I don't know what they are, but the dogs will chew on them.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a big ass turtle. But I thought it was a chew toy in its mouth. Today, The dog put the turtle in the bed.
Oh, yeah. Then Jack might be right. Your dog may just be sending you a message. That's
I
terrible.
was talking to Heather and I go,
That's terrible.
there's a turtle in the bed and you should have seen.
Dude, I don't know what I'd do if I said to my wife, there's a turtle in the bed. I remember a time when a dog brought a dead rabbit into the bed. I thought my wife was going to move.
Well, it's such an obscure, weird thing to say. If I said there's a dead squirrel in the bed, you'd be freaked out, but you'd be like, well, there are squirrels everywhere.
Right.
I don't know where these turtles are coming from.
Yeah, you could have said a dolphin and it wouldn't have been any weirder than turtle. Like you don't expect it.
Yeah, there was a turtle in the bed earlier today. And both times I've had to take the turtle out to the front yard and just let it go. I feel bad though. On one hand, if I let it go in the backyard, the dog could just get it and bring it back in. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that's like, if I separated these turtles from their turtle family and by putting them in the front yard, they won't be able to, I don't know where they're coming from, but I don't know how to reunite them without them potentially ending back up as chew toys in the Ketchum bedroom.
By the way,
the sheets.
Teta, thank you for the additional emoji chat that turtles attract flies. I would like to admit is one of those things.
They caught flies. I'd keep the turtles in the house.
This is one of those things I shouldn't admit, but I will. Teta, earlier when you sent the chat that had the fly emojis in it, I didn't get the connection between that and the flies Ketch has been dealing with. That's how stupid I can be at times. But thank you.
Not? I thought you were hamming it up for exactly that reason.
I hammed it up only because I saw fly emojis. I didn't connect it to your flies, but now it's fully connected. So thank you, Teta, for eventually making me smart, whereas I started.
Nice job, Blinky.
Stupid. Yes, exactly. Way to go. Way to go, Blinky. Welcome to the joke. All right.
All right. Now we can wrap it up.
Like and subscribe and get your notifications. We've got the Wednesday What Are You Drinking Outsiders tonight at 8:30. So jump on in with Chance and Bo and Jason and myself. And who knows what we get into. Chance, if he is the man of his word, will be drinking a Four Loko during the show. So it'll be even chancier and even mockier tonight in the Outsiders. Check it out. Until next Monday at 4, which will be your next recruiting hour. Have a good one. He's Ketch, and I'm Chad, and he's about to go kill a fly. Y'all be careful.